Thanks for joining us so much, everyone. Again, my name is Jake Graham. I'm co-founder and CEO of Bobsled. Bobsled has built the most adopted data sharing platform on the market, enabling data companies to improve and scale the ways that they build, customize, and deliver their data products in any cloud or data platform. I'm really excited for today's conversation for a couple reasons. The first and definitely the most important are the two incredibly knowledgeable guests that I'm joined by. So Jill is Chief Product Officer of LinkUp, and Alejandro is Senior Product Manager at BMLL. I just mentioned this. LinkUp was actually Bobsled's first customer in 2022, which I have to say I will be eternally grateful for. But it also has given me the opportunity to learn an enormous amount from Jill about how you actually create positive data experiences for customers in the cloud. And Alejandro brings years of experience in the space as well, not only helping to build BMLL, which is one of the fastest growing data product companies, I think, ever, but also from his time managing the data product portfolio at Morningstar. So definitely a wealth of experience to bring to the table. The second reason I'm excited about this topic is that building product experiences around data really is a topic I'm really passionate about. Building the tools to enable users to deliver these experiences and to actually start to create a real definition of what a data product is something I've dedicated quite a few years of my life to. I'm the author of way too many tortured metaphors about the similarities and differences of software as a service and data as a service. So I always enjoy talking to people who've actually really built both of those experiences and can bring some real world experience to the conversation. Just to give a quick overview, of Bobsled before we jump in, we are a SaaS platform that enables our customers to create and deliver data product experiences to their customers wherever they work. The product includes a data product catalog built on top of a zero-copy data lakehouse, as well as a data fulfillment engine that is natively integrated with the sharing capabilities of every major cloud and data platform. We work with companies like LinkUp, Info, Dun& Bradstreet, CoreLogic, Deutsche Börse, and quite a few others, enabling them to create better user experiences with their data products, but also increasingly to reduce their costs and complexity to do so. But enough about Bobsled. I want to open this conversation up to our panelists. So the core topic we're here to talk about is data feeds. I want to make that a bit more specific. I think we're really here to talk about how do you build data products that drive analytics, in which your data product is just one part of that larger story, right? In which your customers are bringing in your data to help answer questions within their own environments. And I think one of the major shifts in that is how you think about a product surface for an analytical use case as opposed to a transaction use case. And Jill, I'd love to start with you. How do you think about that difference in experience you're looking to create between the two?
Yeah, it really depends. It depends on the client that we are serving. We serve a wide variety of clients, so everything from the large buy side firms who are focused on the quantitative trading, all the way down to HCM or a job board who really just wants our content to be able to populate their job board, but they may want a specific subset of it. And some people want, we do some customized analytics on our end as well, to make it easier so that our clients don't have to do all that heavy lifting on their end. But then we have, like I said, the first client, they just want the raw data to be able to pull in and put into their models for trading. So we have to be able to serve all of those markets to be able to really meet their needs. And we also introduced a new tool for visualization. So some of our clients don't have the data resources internally to be able to take our data and create those visualizations for insights. And we've just launched a new tool for that this year called Compass, built on Sigma, which lives on Snowflake, which is where we're able to deliver our data thanks to Bobsled.
I appreciate that. So I really like that. You think of it less just in terms of use case analytical versus transactional, but much more in terms of user persona, of what's the level of sophistication. I would think one of the ways that I don't think we talk about enough of that shift in user persona is often in the transactional workloads, your user persona is a developer, right? Who is looking to interact with data in one way Versus to your point, there are quite a few other personas that can interact with data from an analytical perspective, ranging from very sophisticated quants and data engineers and data scientists to more individual analysts who are looking for a more, um, let's say, visual experience. I'm curious, Alejandro, how do you think about this division of use cases, personas, et cetera?
Yeah, interesting that you asked that question because so one of the things that we do here at BMLL is we have kind of a lot of flexibility. So similar to what Jill was mentioned, we have something like Vantage, which is a visualization tool. And then we have another one for more sophisticated, so people who like to do a lot of notebooks and Python. So we have the lab, data lab. And then for those who just said, well, I just want the raw data, so we have our data feed that allows them to consume that data. So again, is as you mentioned, is understand your end user to be able to kind of fulfill their needs and based on what they need, then ultimately we have kind of a solution for them to get you to the right product.
Fantastic. So that actually leads me to my next question. Um, so if we are thinking about, I mean, I think stepping back, I think creating data products targeted for these analytics use cases and the personas around them is pretty new, right? I mean, this is something that's really, I think, we've all been focused on for, maybe 5 years. And I'm curious for both of you, maybe starting with you, Alejandro, what have you learned in the past few years about what really does make a good user experience for data within the analytical world?
Yeah, I think one of the critical parts of it is be able to be clear what your data set, what do you have, what is the definition, what is the schema, to allow the user to be able to integrate that into their internal workflows. And as well be able to be specific of if you have to do changes along the way as well. So that's just to make sure that you have a clear schema, governance around it, and then allows that for your data to be able to be easily ingested and be able to understand by your end consumer.
It's really helpful to just restating. It's almost like that initial experience actually being as close to where the customers are working with other data and doing their work becomes a core part of creating that experience, right? So and I think you also mentioned it's how you manage it over time, right? It's that consistency of how do you evolve it. That's really helpful. Jill, I'm curious, what's your take on that as well?
I'd say it's very similar to Alejandro's. Historically, it was more of just a data set through FTP, right? Such the title of our panel today. But really, increasingly, the demand has been for us to be able to make sure, the three things I care most about is the quality of the data, the timeliness of the delivery, and the way it's delivered, right? Is how easily it is to be ingested, just like Alejandro said. So those are the things we think about all the time, and making sure that we're meeting them where they're at. But it's normalizing the data. It's well structured, and just to reiterate too on over time, how are we making changes and enhancing the data? Is it in a way that it's easy for them to adapt, right? For them to be able to adapt to those changes. And how are we communicating with them? It's that relationship of making sure they're understanding the changes that are coming and why, and if there's any emergencies, how are we fixing those? So it's really building that relationship ongoing with our clients.
So the parallel to SFTP, one of the things that I think about it that you brought up is this idea of data being well structured. I tend to think of one of the biggest challenges with SFTP, aside from the management burden, is that you tend to lose all of the structure of the data, right? I mean, like by actually integrating into whatever analytical framework people are using, you're able to take all of the time and thought and energy that you put into creating this positive structure and actually make sure that it's accessible to them. Um, which I think is one of the biggest shifts that we've seen in moving to sharing protocols away from how I tend to think of it as kind of tossing files over or treating data as files. And it's been really cool recently. I think the world between files and databases have started to blend, right? Of now moving towards table formats with Iceberg and Delta Lake. But really this idea of there's not one right format, but that format, that semantic model, like it is a huge part of your data. And your delivery mechanism it's a huge factor in, how much it can come through. Um, and so if we're talking about fulfillment, Alejandro, going back to you to start, you talked about fulfillment becoming a bigger part of the buying process. You both did. What are the pre-sales and post-sales conversations look like now, and how have they shifted maybe from a few years ago?
A lot of it is understanding where the customer wants the data to be. So it could be in infrastructure, like cloud infrastructure. It may not be necessarily what type of how are they going to the ETL process that they need to do. So a lot of it is a lot of understanding kind of that workflow, because again, our overall goal is to make sure we simplify the way that they intake the data, to make sure that goes from the pre-sale perspective to implementation fairly quickly. So understanding how they're using that data and making sure that you're speaking to the right person at the beginning of the conversation, right? Because you always have your business person that I wants it tomorrow, and then you have your technical team that have different view and have the specific understanding of the overall infrastructure. So one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we speak to that engineering team that is doing a lot of ingestions, to make sure that how we can facilitate that transition, to make sure from the business side, not going to take a long time, and make sure that we get to an so again, understanding, asking those questions from the beginning, understanding what that workflow looks like today and how that potential will look in the future, to make sure that through your whole process, you're part of that process, and simplifying things.
Just how do you think about the trial experience uh, as a part of this fulfillment conversation? Right. One of the things that we hear a lot is the separation between pre-sales and post-sales for our customers. Traditionally, it's just been way too wide, right? Like the experience for someone to actually understand your data and get a cut of it, to actually getting a feed that they can work with. We've heard customers saying it takes weeks to months. I'm curious, how do you think about that trial versus kind of, let's say, the ongoing fulfillment process? Let's to you,
Um,
Alejandro.
oh yeah,
Uh,
it's interesting. It's something that we want to let our customers kind of see the data, because we stand by our data. We understand the quality of our data that we have, and I think once they see the data, and during that trial period, allow them to kind of start the integration process. Because what we want to do is that from that trial to go to full production, and we want to make sure that that is a smooth transition. So like I said, having the trial and allowing to demonstrate that our capabilities to deliver to them quality of the data and the people that we have that support that the data, then it's quite easy. So again, smooth transition. You don't want to go into a trial where give them the data first, but then that's not the structure, the end structure that the customer is going to get, because then eventually, there's from the customer side, this engineer and this people that processing the data, and rechanging that structure, it becomes very complicated and it's not ideal for them. So we want to transition very quickly from a trial to a full blown enterprise.
That makes a lot of sense. Jill, I'd love your take on how fulfillment has shifted, but and then especially as well that pre-sales trial to post-sales service. How have you seen that shift for you over the past few years?
Well, I would echo almost everything that probably everything that Alejandro said. It's so critical. And one of the big pain points we had historically was we would have one team that was doing the trial, and then it would transition once it went to production to another team, and they didn't necessarily understand, or they didn't get that onboarding process. And so there are some nuances with our data. It seems really straightforward, it's job posting data, but there's some nuances that you really need to know. And once you get in and start playing with the data, there's things you just learn about the data. And so if you're working with one team in the trial process and then another in the production, then there comes in an influx of questions to our support team on, well, why is this the way it is? So really trying to minimize that difference is really uh, a goal. And with Bobsled, we've been able to um, really get our data delivered to the platform where the end users are likely going to be able to access the data, so that we're able to get them involved in the trial process, and it improves the onboarding and trial process as well. We have a bit of a unique trial process, and maybe Alejandro, yours is similar to ours, but we do give them full access to all of our data, and so because that's just part of it, especially in that, the large quant traders, they wanna make sure they have all the data and they can, fully test it. But then just really having that access is just key for us. So once they have through the trial, then we get to the production, and just like Alejandro said, you want it to make it as close to the production format, because they don't want to have to recode or retest or do that ingestion process down the road.
The fact that you give full access is, I think it's something that I definitely underestimated until Bobsled started scaling, I think, was the complexity and how unique trials are across each, and how there isn't a cookie cutter way to create a good trial experience for a data product. Because I mean, so just knowing and having worked with LinkUp for a while, a huge aspect of the value of your data is the timeliness of it, right? And
Yeah.
it's constantly shifting. So while having historical data, if someone were to misuse it, they're definitely, you don't want that. But really what you need, they can't get the real value out of it unless they have time. But that's not true in all data products. So we have other customers that what we're seeing is just a push towards more and more customization, and more of that customization need to happen closer to the user. Right. So we've started on a journey of, engineering getting involved in every large trial. A lot of our new product development is to now the actual pre-sales team or people close to the customers to create much more custom trial experiences that let you actually understand the data, but you know, don't give you all of the value at once. And I think that actually brings me to the next question though, which is, I think as a market, we all thought of data feeds and data products as the idea of their standard, right? Everyone's going to get the same data product. And I think in some use cases that works, right? Jill, especially to your point, if you're dealing with hedge funds, you really want access to all data. But as this market is expanding, I think we're all starting to realize that customization is a lot of it's a way to bring out significantly more value for your customers, right? When we talk about you talk about an ETL process, it's not just getting the data into your database. It's how do I get the right data to answer my question? But that obviously creates a lot of complexity from an infrastructure and process perspective. How do you actually offer this customization to your customers? I'm curious, how do you both approach that? Jill, maybe starting with you, how does LinkUp think about customization for individual customers?
Oh, well, we think about that all the time.
Hmm.
We Before we had Bobsled, we have an internal system where our sales team can create customized data feeds for clients. Oftentimes we'll have, like I said, specifically, sometimes we have job boards that maybe they're geared strictly towards nurses, right? So they want a slice of our data that contains all job postings that are specific for nurses or trucking, a specific industry. So we can do that internally. But now with Bobsled, we can do that even further down the road and start doing more customization on the platform where they're at, right? With Snowflake and Databricks, et cetera. So, but as product managers, our goal is to also optimize if you get to every product as a customized product, then it's really becomes challenging to support and manage, right? So we have to think about how do we connect those dots across the requests to make it more of a streamlined product. And maybe it actually triggers us to create a new standard product that is going to meet the different needs of these clients or this persona, if you would. So it's constantly trying to look at those puzzle pieces and how they might fit together, and how are we still serving the client in the way they want to be served.
When you brought up a really interesting topic that we're investing a lot of time in now, I think we're just scratching the surface on data product analytics. So you actually can even get the information of which customers are getting what data and what's actually driving value and how should we think about creating new products. So looking forward to having that conversation with you over the next few months there as well. Alejandro, to you though, how do you at BMLL or previously in your career think about the pull between customization and standard data products?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do here at BMLL is we have the data lab, right? So it allows users to use Python to be able to kind of query our data and create their own analytics if they want, or create whatever they need. So that kind of like the starting point. So a lot of the times, sometimes that as a starting point of the conversations allow that flexibility, but at the same time allow them that we have our standard feeds delivered that allow the customer, in some cases, they want to do more complex or they want to integrate some of that within their environment. So again, there's kind of like that flexibility. But I think as Jill mentioned, I think we need to be able to understand what trends are going and how customers are going. So that's one of the things that we do quite a lot. So we have a great quant team that kind of understands and writes a lot of detailed information about the market. And then that kind of creates some opportunities for us to see, hey, maybe we can kind of create this and getting the customer feedback and internal feedback, we kind of have that flexibility to build something as a product that support our customer. Ultimately, in a lot of the cases when we have that flexibility, we're able to build a product that everybody can use and is more scalable. The point here is a scalability. We need to be able to scale up to serve multiple customers. But I think Jill and I, when in the same thing, we understand what our customers always get their feedback, and then from there build something that works for everybody.
I think it was, I think a number you threw at me in a recent conversation was 130 petabytes is the volume
Yes,
of data. I
yes.
can tell that is the most I've heard, and I think I've spoken with just about every major data company in the world over the past 5 years. So I think it definitely makes a lot of sense that you spend a lot of time thinking about scale. You guys have a very unique perspective on that. One of the things you both mentioned, though, is this idea of whether it's standard or customized, the idea of that data products do need to evolve over time, which I think is a fundamentally different thing than how a software product evolves over time. So I'd love to ask, maybe go back to you, Jill. How do you think about structuring your data products so that they are adaptable and they can evolve over their course of their life cycle?
Yeah, I think the key is for us to, I think I mentioned this before, but our data is well structured, right? And having it normalized to be able to add additional fields just makes it flexible, right? We're not locked into any um, one database or format. As we add new fields, we've recently been adding more derived fields to our data, and that really comes in its own database. They connect together, but at least they offer an opportunity for clients to be able to add this in with ease to their processes. So that's one of the big things, is just making it really flexible, so that we can you know, rejigger or match up or create new things, new products out of the end by bringing different pieces of our data together. So it's really just that flexibility to be able to adapt, as you said.
Now, Alejandro, your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I think overall, historically, a lot of organizations have ignored the change management process, and I think one of the key factors is we need to kind of educate your customers that they need to be flexible, right? Because one of the things is, things evolve. We need to make sure that things evolve, and we need to have that flexibility to be quickly to go to market. So that's one of the things that we quite focus here to, is to make sure that our customers are aware that we're evolving, the data is evolving, and so the things that they deliver. But as Jill mentioned, as long as you have a very structural database, a normalized database, then it's kind of makes the things a little bit easier to allow that quick changes to your data. And ultimately, customers will need that, right? So if you don't evolve quickly, then someone else will come in and kind of evolve, and then you're no longer that the main owner of the data any longer.
If
So
I
on
might
the
if I might add to that, I think one of the key differentiators of a data product, and I guess it is with some of the software too, is this is not just a single transaction, right? Our clients need to rebuy our data every year. So we need to continue to evolve and provide additional value to our data so that they are going to resubscribe, right? So that's one of the key pieces, is we have to continually adapt and anticipate the needs of our clients as well, so that they will continue to resubscribe every year or whatever, every cycle.
so on that note, I mean, we all try to make sure as any product evolves, we don't create a breaking change. But as in any product in which people are continuing to use over time, it's inevitable that eventually you introduce a breaking change in a product. I think there are probably some very specific complexity in that for data products. Uh, Ellen, we'll start with you. what are your best practices for breaking changes in your data products?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing is allow the parallel run of what the old and the new is going to be. So allow the customer kind of ingest that as well. And depends on you change. So if it's a methodology change, allow that, a lot of information for the customer. So again, once you do some methodology change, the customers will have lots of questions. So you need to make sure that you're there and be transparent to your customer. Always be close to your customer. Always update them on things. So if you have a good communication with your customers, these kind of changes are a little bit easier. And again, this is something that we do quite well because we have our support team here that kind of talks to our customers to see where they are, and so make things a little bit easier for us in the long run. So again, transparent about the changes, provide us enough information and time about the changes, and a key part of it is a parallel run of old versus new.
Jill, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with Alejandro. I think we're of very like minds on this. But sometimes it depends on the change. Obviously, we'll run across, like you said, Jake, errors. Like for instance, sometimes we're so dependent on how employers post their jobs, and sometimes they'll put maybe we ran across a situation where they put an emoji in a job title. And, that kind of threw hadn't encountered that before, so that threw a wrench in our system, and, but it's if there's an emergency fix, obviously, we need to be able to have that be transparent with our clients, and that has to happen a little quicker than we would normally, anticipate, but we try to give advance notice, at least, like, 30 days to be able to allow them to get resources. It depends on the size of the change. If it's a major schematic change, then we can offer our programs in parallel or our data in parallel so that they can take their time to test and then transition. But if it's something that's just adding a new field, we can do that anytime, right? It wouldn't impact their changes. So it depends on the change. But like Alejandro said, it's really keeping that communication and transparency open with our clients to be able to have them be able to know what's coming.
I I love the example of how interconnected our world is in unimaginable ways, that someone deciding to put an emoji in a job posting, I can't imagine they would ever think is negatively impacting the day-to-day life of thousands of people who are building financial models based on job postings around the world. I'm sure there are many other examples, but that's one of the more specific ones that a very specific person made a decision that they thought would be fun and ruined the day of many people they will never meet. Um, I'll have to have to think about other examples of that in the future, but jumping to the next question, data governance is, it's not just a massive challenge, it's something that's changing really quickly. I think as data infrastructure and use cases, and definitely now with the, insertion of Gen AI and agents, how data businesses think about governance, I think is really critical. Our experience is that the majority of our customers are still relying mostly on contracts to manage all types of governance and entitlements. But I think we're starting to see both new technologies that are introduced to enable a more programmatic and scalable approach to governance, as well as just more of a requirement as data becomes, a more valuable asset every day. I'm curious, how have any governance technologies, that we're talking about clean rooms, data lineage, other ways of monitoring usage, logging, et cetera, how have they impacted the way that you actually work with your customers? Um, Alejandro, maybe.
Yeah. One of the things that we want to do is have a better data governance in the sense that we're creating lineage between when we intake it from the input all the way to the output, to allow us to have a clear view of what the data is going, and as well have as I mentioned before, we harmonize and normalize a lot of the data, so it's consistent. So we have that consistency. So from that perspective, we're able to have an overview of how data goes and the governance around it. So it is very important for us. It's something that we continue to do. And sometimes it's challenging, right? Because your input sometimes may change and things like that. So you kind of have to adjust that along the way. But as you mentioned, I think lineage of that data, understanding where it goes, it then allows you to have better way to kind of communicate customers and also support our customers along the way.
Makes a lot of sense. Jill, any thoughts on how data governance is evolving? at LinkUp?
To your point, we do manage it mostly through contracts right now, but that's, really limited on
Mm.
how can you tell if someone is abusing your data? And that's research actually we've started in the last in this year of really how do we tag our data or how can we, determine that our data is being used in a way that we are not allowing. So that is something that's definitely on our roadmap and we've been working on to try to figure out, but we haven't solved that problem yet.
A lot of sense. Just how to talk through how we're thinking about it in our roadmap. I think of governance a lot in a crawl, walk, run approach because I think this is very nascent. I think data products in general, um, you know, the business of delivering data to customers has existed for, I mean, Dun& and Bradstreet, I think it's 5 US presidents that worked there. But I think until very recently, it was very services oriented, right? It was very, we're going to help our customers answer a specific question and use our data, which means governance was, very, very limited. And I think as we're seeing data products start to evolve in the cloud, we're finally getting to a place in which you can have governance here. I think where we're focused to start is just around data lineage, right? Of being able to give a clear perspective of who actually has what data, how are you entitling it, where are they getting access to it, have they actually touched it, and who's touched it. I think is actually the first hurdle to get through. And I actually think once we get through it, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for more governance than people would realize. So things like we've had customers who entitle and charge differently for their data for analytics versus programmatic usage. And if you can see, hey, this was hit 150 million times today, that's not analytics, right? You are running some form of programmatic, in this case, advertising use case against it. But it's just getting it into a place in which you have a pipeline for how your data products are built, managed and shared, and that telemetry back, I think is going to be a huge step. I think there's lots of use cases for things like clean rooms and others, but a lot of times I think they're really overkill, and they bring on an enormous amount of complexity that really just streamlining your product management delivery process will bring a lot down for. But I think we're gonna see a lot over the next few years, and I do think the rise of agents for usage is gonna shift quite a bit. Um, Actually, on that note, I'm curious. Uh, Two-part question. One, have either of you seen Gen AI start to shift in a real way, any of the usage of your customers yet? And the second part is how do you s do you are you having at least conversations around where you think that's gonna go? Do you have any predictions around how Gen AI and LLMs will change the usage of your data over the next few years? Uh, uh, Whoever wants to jump in for that one first.
We do have clients that are using our data to train models for other products. So that's probably been in process for the last couple of years already. So we are seeing that as a trend for sure.
Do you price those in any way differently or think about that differently?
Yeah, we do for sure. It's because again, like you said, our data goes stale, right? If you don't continue to get the data, it doesn't continue to grow for them. So that's something
Mm,
that's unique with our data. But it is a bit of a different of a price.
mm, okay, that's helpful. Alejandro, have you seen anything real happen there yet, or any predictions
Um,
for going?
yeah, so as Jill mentioned as well, we do have customers using Gen AI, but as well for us, it's more internal as well. How can we use to improve our overall user experience in the sense how can we answer, how can we support them a lot of it. So it's a combination in both ways of how customers are using and how we use it internally to support our customer to make sure that they have all the information that they need. Again, in some of the cases, some of the data that we have could have very specific, a specific based on the venues. So again, kind of simplify that, make it easy for our customers to kind of see that. And yet it will evolve. Bottom line is you have to have a very good harmonization and of standardization of the data. So for the models to be able to continue to do that. And I think we do we do quite a good job here at BMLL to make sure that have harmonization, to make sure that people have a clear view of our data set across the different venues.
It's really helpful. See, you actually brought up another question that I have. So we have a little bit of extra time here of pricing. Jill, starting with you. So you talked about you are pricing differently for customers who are, at least specifically, who are looking to train LLMs. I think that's another thing that people there's not a lot of clarity around or consistency in the market. Is just pricing in general, right? And I think it impacts a lot of what we're talking about. It has impacts on, do you price differently depending upon where data is delivered? Customization has a huge impact, right? How do you price getting a slice of the data versus all of the data? Uh, I think use case definitely is one that's really critical. I'm curious I'd love your thoughts on best practices for how you price a data product for analytics. Maybe Jill, start with you.
I think you nailed it on all of those, right? It's use case, it's how much work we have to do on our end, it's some of the variability of delivery. Um, so I don't think we have it nailed, but it's definitely something that's ever evolving, right? How much is the market going to bear too, as the demand for data is increased, but it's also become more available. So it fluctuates between uh, the market, especially even our different personas and what the market will bear for pricing. So it's pretty variable.
That's helpful.
But
Alejandro, thoughts?
yeah, no, I mean, the same thing. I think it's use case is one of them, and there's multiple variables, but it's about evolving, right? So the most important thing is you need to evolve your pricing as well as your data. So again, you have to have that flexibility, because as more data you have, the more it's going to be harder to store, sorry, expensive to store, and then you need to allow customers to be able to query that data. So, pay per usage you go into as well. So again, evolve with your customer. That is a fundamental piece of it. If you don't evolve, someone else is going to evolve, and then it's going to take over that. And that's a fundamental piece that you always need to remember.
I know I prefaced in the intro that I love a tortured metaphor about the difference between SaaS and DaaS. But I do think that pricing is a really strong sign of the relative immaturity for the data product business as opposed to software products. I think one of the big shifts from traditional enterprise software to software as a service was when enterprise software was also always priced on, hey, we're not really sure. We're going to try to price it for this customer, for this use case, et cetera. And I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel on the ability to price data in a way that's more transparent. But I don't think it's anything on behalf of vendors not wanting to. It's that we're really learning about what are the different ways in which data generates value for external companies, and how do you actually, decide the right way to capture that. I think it's a really interesting space that's, to your point, Audra, is going to evolve a lot over the next few years. Okay, one last question to try to ask everyone at the end of these is, I would love to hear just a prediction on where you think things are headed in data products over, let's call it, the next 3 years. What is a major shift? Feel free to pull from something we've talked about, or something, something novel pops into your head. Jill, start with you.
Yeah, I know we've talked about customization. That's just, we're seeing a greater demand of that. But one of the things that we're actually trending on is, as you mentioned, we are really fast in our data delivery. I mean, daily is pretty unheard of in our market, but we're getting requests for near real time delivery of our data. So we're actually adapting our processes to be able to accommodate that demand, um, especially from our larger buy side quants. They're looking for more of that near real time data delivery. So that's the big piece. And then back to the customization is, and I'm sure from Alejandro, the size of your data set, no one wants to take that, right? So it's those slices of data that's going to meet their need, are really the biggest trends that we're seeing anyway.
Yeah, and And another one, sorry, Jake, to interrupt you, I think is the availability of your data in multiple regions, right? So now it's no longer one region acceptable. Customers are all over the place, so we need to be able to kind of be in the different locations. So that has multiple challenges across, right? So you have to really think carefully how you're going to be able to expand that, and then give them the flexibility to query your data, right? So customers might just want to query a subset of your data. They want to see everything, but they get a small chunk of it. And then so again, allow that flexibility is quite important. And that ultimately helps our customers find what we have available for them.
It is always great to hear as a technology company, the future described as your existing product and your near-term roadmap. So that's great to hear. There's definitely it makes sense that we all chat. I mean, I think it's it goes hand in hand. It's where the technology is evolving as well, right? Is I think we saw like the market kind of balkanize and everyone move into their own little fiefdoms, and there was debates around data gravity for a long time, and where do you send data? And I think there was a lot of fighting between vendors of, is gravity in your CRM and all your data should go there? Is it actually in the data warehouse or should you keep it on-prem? And I think one of the interesting things that I've seen, and I think the honestly mania around Gen AI and like the intense feeling of urgency from executives to start practicing in it is I feel like we're finally killing the idea that data gravity is going to exist, right? Like data needs to flow. It needs to be fluid. It can't all live in one place. There's cases where you bring compute to data, 130 petabytes, you should bring compute to data. There's cases where data should flow to compute, and trying to create something rigid, I just don't. It's not that I don't think it works. I think the platforms themselves have gotten away from it. And we're starting to see some consolidation around technology that really enables this, right? So one of the things we'll be launching soon, and I know I've spoken with both of you about, is uh, there's a convergence of things like table formats in Iceberg that can be queried natively from any data platform. Really allows you to start delivering the ability to create these interoperable data stores. We're seeing platforms like Cloudflare R2 that you're taking the technology and Rails that were built to deliver streaming video and now applying them into really efficient ways to move data and to grant access to it in the cloud. We're seeing a lot of significant increases in, I think, the governance that allows you to actually manage data in a way in which you can hold one copy and allow people to bring their compute to individual slices and not have to have this um, like manufacturing plant approach to really be able to have a platform approach that I think they're enabling the shifts that you're seeing, right? Which is not always the case. So it's great to hear that what your customers are asking for is kind of what the technology landscape is starting to evolve to provide. Um, but with that, I think we're just about at time. There are a couple questions in Q&A. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through those. What we'll try to do is reach out to folks directly. So if you put a question in there, or if you have one and didn't know that we'll actually answer them, please feel free to put them in there. I just want to say thank you very much again to Jill and Alejandro. It has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for everyone for listening.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun.